I would identify that as strength, and not specifically labeled to a gender, but just strength overall. When it thinks about black masculinity, you see that in mothers, you see that in grandparents, you see that in the youth, the older sibling in families. You see that across the board when it comes to masculinity, being strong and having to take the entire community or your family with you and stepping forward and leading by example. I think back to my grandparents, specifically my grandmother, now deceased, my dad's mother, and there was always a situation to where no matter what it was, you would never know if she had $30 in her bank account or if she was very comfortable. It never changed, and because her husband passed before we came along, but it never changed her demeanor, her attitude toward things. When you think about black masculinity, that was handed down to my father, who directly put that into me and helped craft me into the man that I am today. So really for me, it's all about, being strong, leading by example, and just doing something for others. It's not about you. A lot of times the ego may, fluctuate one way or the other, but it's not about you. And that black masculinity has just been handed down generation after generation after generation. At Indiana University, I had the pleasure of serving as a graduate supervisor within a residence hall. It's the third largest residence hall on campus, where we have 1,000 students. Within my opportunities, I really had a chance to be intentional in my practice. And I really reach out to specifically my male RAs, my male student of color RAs, that really making a connection with them, telling them, reaching out to them and saying, you have challenges that the majority of students don't have to face. How are you doing today? How do you feel included in this activity? How can we improve, so forth and like that. And when it comes down to masculinity, I think that doesn't happen enough to where males feel like they have to do it on their own, to where we don't really reach out and help the next person coming behind us. And I'm really intentional in my practice at IU when I reach out to other students. Those of us who have a good sense of understanding of what responsibility is, we need to come together and have a discussion on learning outcomes, the specific outcomes we want to have with when we convey responsibility to the next person. When we have this set of ideas of what we're exactly trying to articulate, then we want to hold those students accountable and actually show them what responsibility look like. Show them that by doing this action here, this directly correlates to this and indirectly helps this, so forth. They need to be able to see responsibility. And like you said, they hear responsibility and it's like key words say responsible, but you got to actually have this conversation. It's like, okay, this is responsibility. This is what this has grown into. And now look what we have. And that's being responsible. Not just saying I'm responsible for the next person, but really holding this person accountable and seeing those actual results. So it starts with a conversation among those that consider ourselves responsible, and then transferring that into the next person. It starts with changing the thinking. It starts with the thought. And, it's something that really bothers me, is seeing someone limit themselves, or someone that has been defined, and by that definition, when they were defined, they were confined to a certain area of their growth and so forth. And I really want to just say think outside of the box is almost cliche-ish, but to say that there is no box, let's think, let's run with this, and let's really encourage thinking that grows beyond what we're used to seeing. And with that, you really form this model to where people are willing to take a chance, and I think that's a lot of things, that's something that comes with responsibility that people aren't willing to do. Being responsible for somebody means that you're taking on something, and everybody's not willing to take that chance, but you really have to be, rooted in your faith, rooted in a strong sense of thought, that goes beyond what we're used to seeing, and really taking that and moving forward with it. I would love for people to be able to say that Eddie lived the dream, essentially, and I'm walking it right now. And for the things that people think about, you say, I want to go here, I want to do this, and so forth. I had those same thoughts, and now they're my realities. And to say that, it's nothing more than a dream, it's like, not so much. It's very possible. Dreams do come true. They become your reality, and I can only speak of it. it's hard to put it into words, and you think about coming back to TSU and thinking about the leadership courses and my experiences being editor of the Meter, and, and having a chance to interact with great faculty and administrators and so forth. And no one ever told me that you can't do anything, but we tend to limit ourselves, and just being able to say that, the legacy is that all things are possible. And that's the legacy I want to leave. And if anybody ever has a doubt, they can think about Eddie Cole, from Bowlesy, Alabama, 369 people, grew up on the farm, that's me. And they say, well, how do you go from Bowlesy, Alabama to Indiana University, working with the administrators, networking, doing research with some of the top scholars? Because my dream can be a reality, it's real. And, nobody who can stop that, it's all up here. And that's the legacy I want to leave. Any doubt, just think about me. If you doubt anything that you can do, just think about me. And that's the legacy I want to leave. And that's the legacy I hope we're all trying to leave.